Welcome to part 1 of section 1.3. In this course, we do not cover 1.2, so you're not going crazy there. This is applications of linear equations in one variable. Applications means word problems, okay, which I know is nobody's favorite thing, but they're not as hard as people often make them out to be. What I'm going to do is I'm going to list a few steps that you want to go through every single time that you have a word problem. And some of these are not quite as obvious as they sound. The first thing we have to make sure that we do is to read the problem. Now, that sounds obvious. Of course, you have to read the problem before you work it. But it's not quite, it's a little bit more complicated than that. So when you read the problem, you do not have to understand immediately how you're going to get these word problems worked. Okay, that does not happen very often, and it won't happen until you have years and years and years of practice on these. So when you first read the problem, what you are actually looking for is to understand what you're being asked to do. Okay? You don't have to have a clue how you're going to get it done yet. What I often ask my students is I give them a silly name of a town that is somewhere in Texas because that's where our college is based. So think of a town called Telephone, Texas. Or if you happen to know where Telephone, Texas is, think of Turkey, Texas, or Kittiquay, Texas, or Sunrise, or Sunset, or Cut and Shoot, or any name of a town that you don't know exactly where it is. Your problem, the problem I ask you to do, is to get in your car and drive to Telephone, Texas. Now, you might not have an idea where you're going at all, but you should probably understand how you can figure out what you need to know in order to get the job done. So you think about, okay, well, if I don't know where I'm going, that's one type of problem. And the tool I have to get that thing solved is I have a map, I have GPS, I have all these different options to figure out where this town is and then get in my car and go. So I'm not panicked from the beginning because I know exactly what tools I have to get it done. I don't know where I'm going, but on the first read through, when I first know what I'm being asked to do, I know that I can do it. So read the problem, make sure you understand what you're going to be asked to do, and then go on, okay? The second thing we do is we organize our information. Okay, so this is where we're going to do some translations. And what I mean by that is we're going to take the English language and we're going to turn it into math language. So we're going to be talking about translations a lot. Think of these as regular languages. Think of math as a language, and we're going to do a translation from math to English and sometimes English to math. Okay, we're just going to have a bunch of different pieces here. We're going to start breaking down what it is we think we're going to need to get this thing solved. And we're just going to break it up. It's going to be different for a bunch of different types of problems. Okay? The third step is to write the equation. That's probably the hardest step. If you can get to writing the equation, you've done most of the difficult part on a word problem. Okay? The fourth step is also fairly obvious. We're supposed to solve this equation. Okay, so after we solve it, then this may not be the answer to the entire problem. Okay, so we're going to solve the equation and we're going to get an answer, but we don't know if that answers the problem completely. So the fifth step is to answer the question. That is a cursive Q. It's not some weird H, or I don't know what other people have thought it is, but that's a Q. Okay, so make sure you answer the question. You might have to do another little step from going from here to here. This may be the answer to the problem totally, but you always need to make sure that you've answered it. And this last step is very, very important, but you don't have to write it down. You just need to think about it a little bit. What you want to do is you want to ask yourself if your answer is reasonable. Okay, these answers belong in the real world. You cannot have a negative number of coins in a jar. So if that's the answer you got when you were working through the whole thing, if you have a negative number of coins in a jar, you should recognize, hey, this can't be true. I made a mistake, and you should go back and try to figure out where you went wrong. So like things like you can't have a negative number of coins in a jar. You can't have a fractional number of coins in a jar. You can't bring 2.53 buses on a field trip. You can't have 2.7 people in a room. We don't deal with fractional people. It's those kinds of things you need to be aware of. It usually takes a couple of seconds to think through whether or not your answer makes sense, and you can go try to find your mistake. As we work through this section and also the next one, I will be helping you identify different types of word problems. And then once you can identify the type, then the rest of this becomes a whole lot easier. We will also be talking about what is reasonable, what would not be reasonable when it comes to these different types of problems. Okay?